Ladies and gentlemen, we have a big-time guest joining us today, longtime investigative journalist and author. You've seen him work with CBS Sports, HBO Real Sports, the one and only Armen Keteyian. Mr. Keteyian, welcome, sir.
Thank you, William.
It's a pleasure to have you. I reached out to you, just a cold email.
Yeah, you did.
And you responded.
Yes,
That's a big deal. You know, these are life-changing opportunities for me, and I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I liked your style. You know, you weren't too aggressive, but you were respectful. And, you know, I don't do this a lot, especially in long sit-downs, because I've kind of realized over the years, especially as you get older and you have built a career, less is often more.
Right.
And, you know, the less you say, the better it is.
Right.
And especially in this day and age. So congratulations. You got me in a chair in front of a microphone.
I got you. An 11-time Emmy award-winning journalist. I have a studio back in Brooklyn, and I decorated the wall with covers of books that I appreciate, you know, especially as it pertains to sports. And one of those books on the cover on the wall is your book, The System, The Glory and Scandal of Big-Time College Football.
Yeah.
This came out in 2013. It was actually required reading during my doctorate program that I finished last spring. And it's college football bowl season. I want to do some college football content. But then I remember, hey, I hate college football.
That's a little problem.
And then I had the bright idea, well, maybe we can do a podcast about some of the issues I have with college football.
Yeah.
And in this book, you cover a lot of the details about the sport that make me uneasy.
Yeah.
For one, I don't think the sport is competitive enough. A lot of times I see Big State University trouncing Little State 53-3 or 63-19. And I feel like you covered that in a chapter called The Sacrificial Lamb.
Yeah, Towson University at the time. Towson University now, right? They go down to LSU basically to collect a check.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of what, and Jeff Benedict, my co-author on that, who was also the co-author with me on the Tiger Woods book, you know, we always were thinking big. And the system is a very, very deep, wide dive into big-time college football, the elite programs, whether it was when Mike Leach was at Washington State and Nick Saban, obviously at Alabama. I was around the Michigan program a lot when Dave Brandon was there as the athletic director. We got into a lot of places, I think, because of our reputations built up over time, that people trusted us when we came in, that we weren't out to get anybody. We were just out to bring big-time college football to life as much as we possibly could. And one of the places I was able to really spend a lot of time was at Towson.
Yeah.
And I was curious is because that's exactly what it was. You know, that's a complete payday for the university. And for a, you know, an FBS program like Towson, this is, you know, it was, I think, almost $1 million that they got. It helps balance an athletic department budget and pay for a lot of the non-revenue sports. Right. Towson wasn't making money, I don't believe, in any sport. But I was able to get on the plane down to Baton Rouge, spend time with the head coach, who was fantastic, the president, the athletic director. And, you know, there was this Christians and Lions kind of feel to it. You know, we're going to go down there and we're going to get our ass kicked, but we're going to walk away with a paycheck. But then inside that locker room, when I was there, when the coach was really, he was fantastic, just in putting everything in perspective. You know, they showed a great video of Muhammad Ali, you know, people getting up off the canvas. You know, we're going to be in a fight. And I don't know if you've ever been down there, and I had never been to Baton Rouge.
To LSU?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
For a football game.
Death Valley.
Death Valley, and it's there's a reason it's called Death Valley, because you know, you are going in as the victim there, especially at Towson. I remember it was a rainy night, and it was almost like a Scottish fog there, and you know, just the players and the bus that I was on was all the administrative people. Right. And as we pull in, the bus kind of has to sweep through these winding streets under the catacombs under the stadium. And I look out and it's in the book. And I look out the window, and there's a father with his little tow-headed son. He must be about 10 years old. And I look, and they're both standing on the side of the road flipping off the bus as they go by. And I thought, well, welcome to LSU and Baton Rouge. And Towson gave, that was a stacked LSU team. And I think Odell was there. Odell Beckham was on that team. And Towson was, there's one point in time when Towson was leading. I don't remember the score, but I remember the athletic director taking a picture of the scoreboard as a reminder that we came down here and we gave these guys a game. And they did. I think they ended up losing by like 11 or 12, but it was a ball game. And in the end, Towson was the winner. And they actually had a very good team that year that went into the playoffs.
You said they were a winner. They lost the game. What makes them a winner, you say?
Well, because they held their own, and then they didn't get their ass kicked and wiped all over. I mean, when Western Carolina or New Mexico State goes into Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, they know that they're not walking out of there with anything close to a win. I mean, a lot of those times, the spreads on those games are somewhere between 45 and 50 points sometimes, and it's an exercise in check collecting, and that's just the facts of life, and we're the facts of life. Now it's interesting because, that particular season there were upsets. The underdogs go in and they beat the home team, and we've seen that more lately. I think as college football has evened out at a certain level, like you said, there's 4 or 5 programs right now that are head and shoulders above anybody else. Right. You can start with Alabama and then Georgia, Texas A&M, I think Michigan, Ohio State, because they just have so much money coming in through what are now the regional television, networks that in the SEC, some of those payouts are $40 million, $45 million a year. That's basically found money for these universities. And so they just pour more money into facilities, coaching salaries, and things like that. And it's just impossible for the average school. You could take Michigan State and Mel Tucker. They just gave him an enormous contract, but it was paid for by 2 alums, basically. Yeah. It didn't come out of the bottom line budget of the Spartan athletic department. But the numbers now are so insane that I think a lot of schools, like I went to San Diego State, and then I'm sorry for going on here, but I went to San Diego State. They're building a stadium now. It'll be ready next year. The Aztecs were ranked, I think, in the top. They ended the season, I think, 24 23 in the country. I think they went 11-2. They have a program on the rise, and they've been very strong. But they're in that middle ground. They're part of the Mountain West Conference. It doesn't have a big television contract. There's not millions and tens of millions of dollars flowing into that athletic department. But I have relationships there with people, including the athletic director. And I said, if you don't build a stadium here, if they have to go to, what was then Qualcomm Stadium with 60,000 seats, you're dead in the water because you can't draw 60,000 people to a football game at San Diego. You can draw 35,000, and you can pack that new stadium, and it gives you a springboard to now be an attractive option for certain conferences. Right. And but we were talking about it back in 2013. I mean, it's just an arms race.
It is.
And it's not slowing down by any stretch of the imagination.
In the book, you referenced I think it was a Towson student newspaper, and they said the football team is going to prostitute themselves for a check to basically go into LSU and get crushed just for monetary gain. Is this a good thing? Is this just the way it is? Because proponents of the arrangement will say, well, these monies help to support the athletic department all around, which is women's soccer, women's lacrosse. Like, is it something that's just necessary? Is it good? Is it avoidable?
Well, I always looked at it is that the football players were the sacrificial lambs.
Right.
I mean, you walk out of a game playing LSU, that's not like playing James Madison University. Mm-hmm. there's men on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And a lot of times what happens is these teams take a beating, and I mean a literal physical beating,
For sure.
and they can't recover for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they go into their league play. So, is a check for $600,000, $700,000 worth it? It's worth it to the guy that's depositing in the bank for the university.
Yes.
But I don't know how worth it is to the athletes themselves. A lot of them want to play on that big stage, and felt like Towson had a lot of D1 players that had transferred out of those schools. And now we're at Towson. So they had some real athletes on their team. They just didn't have enough of them. And it's deep. But, you're right. There's, what's happening now in college football is complete, utter chaos between name, image, and likeness, the portal, the transfer portal, the amount of money that can be made for reaching the Final Four playoff for not only the school itself, but the conference. So there's a tremendous incentive for schools and conferences to make it into it. And now this push to go all the way to 12. I just don't know. Look, it's professional football at the highest level. But how long can these kids, they're not 25, 26 years old, 23 years old, they're 18, 19. Can they, they start in, I'll say it this way. I was talking to a former Arizona State quarterback, and I asked him, how many weeks a year do you get off from, and this is Pac-12 football, right?
Yeah.
Big time. So he holds up his hand, and he goes like this. I get 5 weeks off.
Wow.
So 47 weeks a year, he's doing something associated with that football program, whether it's winter conditioning, training camp, the season, the post-season, injury rehab after the season's over. And that is on top of actually having to be a student.
Yes.
And I just don't know how many more games they can stuff into a season before, the players just rebel and just say, look, we're not going out there. It's already started. You don't have to look very far to see that the ground has completely shifted.
Yes, and as we get closer to some of the bowl games, some guys opt just not to play. It's just too much.
Right.
Armen, who runs college football? If there's an issue, who can we go to? Who's in charge?
Well, there's nobody in charge. The NCAA, it's important for your audience to understand, the NCAA is $1 billion a year operation, but 95% of that money comes from the college basketball, March Madness, the tournament that CBS and Turner are paying an enormous price tag for basically 3 weeks of basketball. CBS, and I did 7 Final Fours, which was my favorite event to do. But, the regular season and the conference tournaments are basically just appetizers for where all the money is made, which is in that 3-week period. And the NCAA, that's their baby. That's what runs the engine in Indianapolis. College football is a very small piece of revenue for the NCAA. And so, when Mark Emmert or a conference commissioner says something, let's just say Mark Emmert. Mark Emmert, for all his bluster and his beliefs about amateurism, which has changed greatly in the last year, thanks to the Supreme Court, the conference commissioners just kind of go, yeah, that's like your crazy neighbor next door. You know? And so who runs it? I would say the commissioners of the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, a little bit of the Pac-12. The Big 12 is sort of, they're around. But I think if this point in time, there's been a lot of calls for a commissioner of college football.
Right.
And I think that's a really smart idea. I would not bring out the usual suspects that the NCAA kind of always brings in.
Right.
First of all, they can't do it full time because like Condoleezza Rice or somebody like that, she's got a day job.
Right.
And I think that whoever it is, they need something and somebody that can either slow the train down or just let the playing field stay a little more level than it is right now.
Well, the NCAA doesn't draw much revenue from college football. The college football playoff was actually created by a few of the conferences.
They were created by ESPN in the conferences.
So the NCAA is not even involved in that.
No.
Why is that not more known? Why doesn't the NCAA say, hey, that's not our program, when they usually sometimes take a licking for the things that go on in college football? Like publicly, everybody say, oh, that's the NCAA taking advantage of these kids. But the NCAA is not involved with this.
Well, I think, William, is that you just can't look at it in under one light, because college sports, when you start to deal with what is the NCAA, it's an association of member schools. And their out is, at least in Indianapolis, is we don't vote on anything. We don't tell these schools what to do. They vote on the direction that they want their athletic departments to go. And sometimes they're forced kicking and crying, particularly with Ed O'Bannon and the name, image, and likeness that went on for years and years before the Supreme Court ruled. I mean, it was laughable at certain times when you'd hear this phrase student athlete, right, and then you'd actually be where Jeff and I were for more than a year, inside these programs. And, let's just say, for example, you got up at 7 o'clock in the morning and your weight training session was at 7 o'clock. Then you go to practice. Then you go to class for maybe 2 or 3 classes. And then you come over to the facility and you have lunch. And then by then you're in the training room getting taped and preparing for practice that starts at 2 through 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 after meetings and everything. Then you eat again, you grab something to eat, and what do you have to do? Oh, you have to go to the academic center and work with a tutor, and you're dead tired.
Yes.
And if you're the rare student athlete, then you thrive in that environment. If you're like a lot of other people, you're dead tired, and all you want to do is go home and go to bed because you got to do the same thing tomorrow. So, that's part of the system too. Is the tutors. It's a slippery slope between what you're doing and what the tutor is doing, and that's one of those like little alcoves within the system that people don't generally look at. One of the chapters I loved was the chapter on the hostess, who was at Tennessee, Lacey Pearl Earps. And I mean, she was a rock star. She was a reason that program under Lane Kiffin started to recruit. I think his name was Bryce Brown, who was the top running back in the country out of Kansas. Well, he wasn't going to Tennessee because he loved Lane Kiffin. He was going to Tennessee because he had feelings for Lacey. And now to me, it's a fascinating dynamic because of what is expected at certain schools. Yes, you take the athlete around. Yes, you show them a good time. Yes, you take them to a party. You might take them for ice cream. Okay, then what are the other expectations? And some of the girls at Tennessee, when those expectations became clearer, that you really had to sleep with somebody in order to do what was right for the program, they were appalled. So to me, that kind of storytelling and that kind of the depth of the reporting, that's what Jeff and I have always prided ourselves on. Is reporting is hard.
It is.
It's road work.
Yes.
It's like you want to run a marathon, you got to go in and put in the miles.
Yes. That chapter about the hostess, these college programs have teams of beautiful ladies that they use to recruit these players. And that's why I brought up the NCAA, because I feel, again, the NCAA takes a bashing sometimes, and it takes attention away from those that really may be running them up, coaches, presidents, people of that nature. Another piece you covered in the book, boosters.
Yeah.
These men mostly who have some money and they donate to the program. You have what's called jock sniffers who just like to be around the players. But then you had the turbo boosters, two
Yeah.
people in that category, T-Bone Pickens at Oklahoma State University
Yeah.
and Phil Knight at Oregon.
Oregon.
They gave hundreds of millions of dollars to put their names on stadiums, uniforms, everything. What do you think of that dynamic? Is it truly altruistic? Like, what's going on there?
Oh no, I mean, I guess part of it is altruistic with a lowercase a. You know, I spent some time with this guy Jimmy Raine, Rayne, who is the biggest booster at Auburn. He was he started his own company called Yellowwood, which is it's big in the South. He was a fascinating man, self-made. Phil Knight, self-made. Boone Pickens, self-made. Each school has somebody that the coach can turn to if they need something. Maybe it's use of a private plane. Maybe it's something a little more nefarious. But I just found them. Look, they love their schools. They've made their millions. They want to do whatever they can to help the program. And I think what you're seeing now with the name, image, and likeness bomb that went off, it's above board now. They don't have to, show up with a briefcase full of $100,000 in cash to give it to an assistant coach to say, okay, use this any way you want to get the player you want. Right. And, we didn't put it in the book because we weren't 100% sure of the school, but there was no question that there were times when, an assistant coach would come to a booster's house. There'd be 20 guys. They were all men of means. They would show up with briefcases. Inside that briefcase was $100,000 in cash. So multiply 100 times 20. What do you get? You got $2 million slush fund that's off the books that a school can use to get the game-changing players that they want.
Wow.
And, one of the players, Ricky Seals-Jones, who was now in the NFL as a tight end, was at A&M. And, we put it in the book, the number for Ricky Seals, and his father told us to our face, across his heart, that they never took anything for Ricky to go to, but the number was $600,000. So imagine that.
What, that number came from where? 600. That's what his family wanted?
That's what schools were willing to offer.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what the family wanted. The father told me, Mr. Jones told me flat out, we didn't want anything. This was all above board. Right. And I believed him because we didn't have anything that was contrary to that. What we did have was firsthand information of people that had made offers. And the number kept going up. And Ricky was one of the top players in Texas. And, A&M, Jimbo Fisher just had his top recruiting class. That's a power program. You go to their stadium, you go to their facilities. They've got a hotel right next to the stadium that boosters can, for whatever, $10,000 or $12,000 a year, they get a room at 6 home games. So they don't have to. They can park their car right there. It's a monster program, and so I think now with the whole NIL thing, that's going to bring this stuff above the ground. Right. So if you own a cart dealership and you're a booster, you could easily say to the top recruit, come to my school, come to our school, and twice a year I'll pay you $20,000 to sign autographs for an hour before the season starts and after the season starts, so you're not bothered during the season. Okay, well, that's $40,000. Yep. And, for the longest time, I was against paying the players. I felt like once that Pandora's box was opened, you weren't going to be able to close it in a way that was going to be a benefit to the system itself. But having seen now the obscene amount of money that pours into college football, and even more so the obscene amount of money that university presidents are signing off on coaching contracts and then paying off some of these contracts to the tune of, $10 million. the players deserve everything they possibly can get. And it was a hard time coming for me to that conclusion because, with Pell Grants and then the cost of living, cost of attendance, some of these, at the top programs, some of the players were getting $5,000 or $6,000 a year above the room and board and the scholarship. So, that's $500-$600 a month. That's not bad. I wasn't getting that when I was in college.
Right.
Doubt you were either.
No, sir.
And then, okay, now, I think it's kind of Katie bar the door. It's whatever the number is. And I think Saban has been really upfront. What is he selling? He's selling Alabama. He's selling a 40-year commitment, not a 4-year commitment from that university.
40 years to the athletes?
Yeah, it's like you sign a 4-year deal for scholarship, but you're part of the family for 40 years. And a lot of that is bullshit coming out of coach's mouths.
Yes.
And but I've seen it up close with Nick, and that's his philosophy. And it's he walks the talk too. He doesn't say it and then do something else. Now you're held accountable like nowhere else I've ever seen. And it's like the Bill Belichick school of college football coaching, but they get a certain kind of kid, a great kid that knows going in generally what you're in for. I think some of these other schools, they just sell them a bill of goods, and they end up getting tossed to the side, getting hurt, transferring. It's a cutthroat business because the payoffs now are so big. I think the winning school, I may be wrong, but it's close to 25 or 30 million. You win a national championship. That ESPN money is no joke.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
That's worth
cheating for.
Yes, people have cheated.
That risk-reward thing.
For sure. College football, Nick Saban.
Yeah.
You wrote about him in the book. I think you spent a few days with him recently with The Athletic.
I did, and I did a 60 Minutes piece on him probably now. It must have been like in 2000, maybe 10 or 11. It might have been in 13 because it was right around when the book came out. So I've been around him a lot, probably more so than any other college program, in the country.
Give me a word to describe Mr. Nick Saban.
Perfectionist.
Perfectionist.
And that's an easy word to say. It's a really hard word to do. And he's intense. He's absolutely prepared. He's pretty funny. You get him in the right moments. I think he's, it's more than one word. I think he's one of a kind when it comes to college football. The fact that he's 69 years old and, after they beat Georgia, literally the next day on social media, there's Nick in Florida with a recruit. There's Nick in South Carolina with a recruit. There's Nick somewhere else with a recruit. The man has an engine. I'm going to be 69 years old in March. I have a pretty big engine still. I don't have one that's, I'm running a V4,
right.
Compared to Nick's, supercharged car that he's wailing around in. But what I really like about him is that you know what you're getting into when you go there. Not every kid, obviously can start and makes it through the program. But he gives you an opportunity to grow up and be a man and learn what it takes to be a success in life. And that's the process. That's what Nick talks about. And that process is applicable in almost any walk of life. People focused on tomorrow, they don't get things done today. Nick has a million of these things now. Right. But I find him to be, I trust Nick and he trusted me, which is one of the reasons we got that kind of access for 60 and The Athletic. I think he likes the fact that whether it's me or Tom Rinaldi or there's Chris Lowe from ESPN, he's got a handful of reporters, both locally and nationally, that he trusts, that he knows that when we go in there, I'm not trying to make a name for myself by catching Nick Saban in something.
Right.
All I'm trying to do is bring that program to life any way I can. And you don't get that without access and without trust.
For sure. Mr. Keteyian, I appreciate Nick's 7 national championships, 5 at Alabama, perfectionist, attention to details. These are things I appreciate. My own college career, my career as a military veteran. But I have a hard time embracing Nick because of his departure or how he departed from the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And you write about that in the book. You know, we know he had that press conference on, what was it, December 21st, 2006. He said, what do I have to say? I'm not going to be the next head coach at Alabama. And then a few weeks later, he was the head coach of Alabama.
I think he was in a situation where it was a state of flux for sure. And, you know, the recruiting of Nick by Alabama, by the athletic director at the time, was really the recruiting of Miss Terry Saban, Nick's wife, which if you're smart about it, that's the way to go. And I was down there. It's funny, when I was at CBS Sports, Nick's first year as a head coach for the Dolphins, I did a multi-part I went down there multiple times to do which for CBS, the NFL Today, I think it was an 8-minute piece that ran during the playoffs, right, on that like Saturday before the Saturday game that CBS had. So when I originally went down there, Harvey Green was the PR person at the time and very experienced. And I said, you know, Harvey, I want to come down here 4 times, and I want to do like every 3 months, take Nick's temperature at the beginning of the season, you know, like sort of when they talk about on a racetrack, you know, the quarter pole, the half pole, you're coming around the clubhouse turn, and then the end of the season. And that was the year. And Nick was like, I don't want to do that.
No,
I don't want to do that. And Harvey said to him, look, you want to do this, Nick, with Armen. And to his credit, Harvey stuck up for me, and Nick was like, all right. And then first time it wasn't great, you know, because he doesn't really give up much in the beginning. But then he saw how I worked, and I saw some things, and I asked him about it. And in the end, it was a terrific piece. They won their last, I think they ended up 9-7 that first year. And I knew Zach Thomas, and I knew Jason Taylor, so I had some ins there because I had covered the league, you know, from the sidelines for a long time, still was. And he was just, first of all, he didn't have a quarterback. You know, he wanted Drew Brees, and that didn't work out. It's a, you know, well-told story. He just wasn't well suited for Miami. The facility was kind of really shitty, you know, and it was hot down there, and it was just not, and Terry didn't really like it. And I think when Alabama came around, have you ever been to Tuscaloosa?
No, sir.
Yeah, it's a great college town, T-town as it's known, and it was a perfect environment for Nick, and more importantly, it was perfect for Terry, because she could settle in down there. Because, you know, Nick's, you know, his schedule is his schedule. You know, he's up at 6:15. He's out the door, well, whenever he gets up, but he's out the door at, starting to have his Debbie's cookies and his coffee, and then he's out the door. And he's very much a man of routine. So I think he got caught off guard. He said something. He said, I regret saying that. I made a mistake. He's owned up to it over time. And I just don't think he was suited for that. I mean, we saw it today with Urban Meyer, you know, getting fired by the Jaguars. You just don't treat grown men like you when you control a program when you're playing God at Ohio State.
Right.
You can't play God in an NFL locker room. That doesn't go very far. That goes nowhere.
Right.
And, you know.
And for that reason, like if I'm having a meeting of the best football coaches ever, of course, Belichick is there. Before I get to Nick Saban, I'm going to call for guys like Jimmy Johnson, who won a national championship at the University of Miami and then went on the biggest stage and won with the Dallas Cowboys. Pete Carroll, somebody that did it at both levels. And you wrote about this in the book. Some of the details, like Nick Saban's second year at Miami, he turns to his agent halfway through and said, man, I think I want to go to college.
Yeah.
And then when he is about to leave, he has the Alabama AD He tells him to park down the block because I don't want the cameras to see that you're here.
Yeah.
And then pull into the driveway, throw the suitcases in there, and then he heads off to Tuscaloosa to adoring fans.
Yeah.
You were faced with adversity, and it seems like he ran. You know, Dan Le Batard was very critical, said he left a quitter. I'm not going to call Nick Saban a coward. I don't know that man. The action seems somewhat cowardly to me, Armen.
I don't see him that way. I see him as, look, Alabama put a lot of money on the table. Nick was unhappy. I mean, you see these guys now. Shit, look at Brian Kelly. You know, I mean, that's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned, to say goodbye to your program. And, you know, thanks a lot, fellas. Now I'm down here, you know, in Baton Rouge speaking with a Southern accent. I mean, ridiculous. It's just, I think there's a point where there's just no shame anymore, that they'll say anything and do anything. And then, I mean, honest to God, I think sometimes, wow, so you're getting paid to fail. I mean, you're getting paid a lot of money, and you've got a window of 2 or 3 years, and if you don't win, which is really hard to do in a certain conference like the SEC, you take the money and you go and live a nice life. And look, I know I can't speak for Nick. What I can say is I know it was a really hard decision, and it was a decision that if it wasn't for Terry, who really wanted to leave, I think Nick would have stayed. But I think that he understood more than you know, almost anybody. If you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, you're not going to win, and you're just banging your head against the wall for far too long. I mean, it's a quarterback league, and you know, it's an offensive line league to protect your quarterback. And if you don't have that, and I think he was looking down the road at what he had at quarterback and what he could have had. And, you know, there's just, I mean, he doesn't do it halfway. So when you're all in every day, all day, it gets exhausting and you start to look for other things. So I can see how people, and look, I read all the newspaper clippings, and, you know, Dan, he was upset, and rightly so. I mean, there were a lot of people that felt like, you know, Nick backed out on him. And I just saw it a little differently, but I can certainly understand why people feel that way.
All right. I can now embrace Nick Saban.
Okay.
You know, and all his greatness.
Well, I'm not his PR guy, but I do.
No, he really is great. And how do you explain that dominance? I mean, there's other coaches out there working too, trying to win games. For him to have this sustained, like, what's the key?
Well, the key is he's relentless. You know, first of all, as I said, I mean, I can't believe the amount of hours, but he's also incredibly efficient in how he operates. We've seen the kind of assistant coaches he hires, because half of them now are coaching in the SEC. Leaves no stone unturned, attention to detail, speaks to the recruits on a fatherly, personal, professional level. The facilities at Alabama are second to none. I guess you could argue maybe I haven't seen like the latest Oregon facilities, but you know, you have a world-class stadium, you have a world-class workout facility, world-class meeting rooms, the best food. You're a star if you're playing at all on campus. It's a great place to be. He's used every advantage that he's created. And I remember in the 60 Minutes piece, I asked then the president of the university about Nick's contract. And I think at that time it might have been $5 million or so, just off the top of my head. And he said, without equivocation, it's the single best investment that the University of Alabama has ever made. And you look at, I can give you a point, certainly the buildings now. I mean, when Nick came there, out-of-state students, I think, were like 27% of the student population, maybe 30%. We're in Connecticut right now talking. There's a list of schools around here: New Canaan, Darien, Westport, Fairfield, Greenwich, that when the University of Alabama recruiter would come up here, there might be 10 people in the room with their parents. Now, when they have a University of Alabama gathering here in Fairfield County, there's 200 or 300 kids that want to go to Alabama.
Sure.
That's the Nick Saban effect, and I've seen it in the donations from the boosters, from the image of the school, because the football program is like the front porch of a university. That's what it's considered to be. So if I'm making a choice as to where I want to go to school, and I'm up here in Connecticut, and I say, God, that Tuscaloosa looks pretty good. Alabama, it's a great education. I got the best fall football season anybody could ever imagine. Then you go down there, and now 57% of the Alabama undergraduate, at least that was the last number I knew, is out of state. So they just basically flipped it. And when you're paying out of state money to go to Alabama, instead of, a small portion of that in state, it makes a huge difference to the university. And there's nobody. And what I love about Nick is he's not keeping this money to himself. I mean, he and Terry have given a lot of money back to the university in scholarships. And so he just does the right thing.
That's good. That's good. You mentioned Urban Meyer just recently fired from by the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
What did you think of his first year, and what do you think his future holds?
I thought he was a disaster. And the more I read about it, the bigger the disaster is because of how he treated his coaches. If I read what is accurate, what I read today, he's saying that I had a better coaching staff at Bowling Green than I have, in Jacksonville. And these are grown men.
Didn't he assemble the staff?
Well, he did.
Wow.
Yeah. But, it's not his fault, right? I was never a big fan at Florida.
Armen.
Yeah. And I was definitely not a big fan at Ohio State. And I got a lot of shit from the Ohio State people because I said some things about, what had happened, I think with Ryan Smith and everything that happened there. And it just, to me, it's just, these are grown men. I spent a lot of time in the Patriots locker room when they were winning Super Bowls from, when did I start on the sidelines? 98 to 2006. And, I mean, those were men.
Yes.
Rodney Harrison, Junior Seau, Richard Seymour, Tom Brady, Ty Law, Lawyer Malloy, Mike Vrabel. I mean, those were men. You don't berate or belittle those kind of men into doing your bidding.
Right.
You have to lead them. And, this leadership is an interesting thing. You can lead by fear or you can lead by inspiration. Obviously, I think Urban's choice is to intimidate and to put fear into people, and I've never been a big fan of that.
Not only did he get to take over an NFL franchise, but he got the number 1 pick.
Yeah,
and he had a quarterback that many believed was one of the best college quarterbacks ever. Going back to his incident where
William, if you don't have a team around the quarterback, the one thing I've learned in this, I'm working on this different book now, and it's not like I'm breaking new ground here, but if you don't have a running game and you don't have an offensive line, you can have the best young quarterback. I mean, we're looking at, Zach Wilson here in New York with the Jets. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have 5 seconds to throw the football before, and let alone make 3 reads. And Peyton went through the same thing. There's, look what happened with, who was the Indianapolis quarterback that went out? Oh man,
Carson Wentz?
No, not Carson. Before him, Andrew Luck.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew Luck got sacked one season 47 times. So it's there's a reason it's a team.
Yes.
And I think that Shad Khan did what I thought he did the right thing today, and he said all the right things. This man's, he's made a lot of money in his life, and you can see he's made it. In my mind, he's made it the right way. He's not going to let somebody like this pollute a $1 billion or more franchise. And I think what he did, look, this guy Darren Bevel that they brought in as the interim coach. Players are raving about him. Now, maybe that's because he's their friend. That's not going to last long,
Right.
The people that play for Bill Belichick, the last thing they're going to say is, "Oh, Bill's my friend."
Right.
But will they play their asses off for him? They sure will, because they respect him, and they respect that they're going to be put in the best position to win a football game on Sunday.
For sure. When I look back at Urban's incident this last season, where I think after a Jaguars loss, he was pictured in a Columbus, Ohio bar with close to a woman that was somebody other than his wife. I just look at that as a total disregard for the whole arrangement. If your team loses, you need to be on the plane with them. And you spoke about leadership. It makes me wonder who they are as leaders, and then how truly great are they as coaches if they can only survive in the college environment where those young men are not on equal footing with them.
Right.
They're capitalizing off of a system that these kids are desperate. They want a ticket to the NFL to do whatever you say. So I just question their leadership. Like Urban Meyer,
Yeah, no, I thought that was, you talk about stupidity. And he said, I was supposed to see his kids or something,
Right.
but he said he had too much to drink. He's in a bar. That picture, that's just, you have to understand that this isn't 2000 where, there's no cell phones anymore. Everything is captured now by somebody. And you are forced to, you're held accountable for your behavior, whether you want it or not. Society is already judging you, and Twitter's judging you, and Instagram's judging you, and the parade of wall-to-wall analysts and commentators are judging you. And I just don't know how you can do something like that. And then, okay, you have to apologize, but is there really something that that turns that apology into a belief,
Right.
That you're the right person for this franchise? And I think Shad Khan said it. He goes, we gave him an opportunity after that incident to regain our trust. It didn't happen. And so, he made a tough call, but I think he made the right one.
You see Urban going back to college?
Oh, Jesus, I don't know.
Yeah, after Ohio State, where's there for him to go? That was his dream job, right?
What's he addicted to? That's the thing. Is he addicted to the game? Is he addicted to the spotlight? Is he addicted to being Urban Meyer in a the savior coming in at Vanderbilt or some other place? He's God knows how he's got probably made more money than he's ever going to need in his life. But these guys can't stay away, and part of that is just the wires are crossed, up there, or the programming is the way it is. Something that's funny. I said it to Nick because Bear Bryant died, I think, 23 days after he retired, walked away as the head football coach at Alabama. And I mentioned that to Nick. I set the scenario, Nick, how long can you coach? And here's an example of a guy who just said he couldn't live without it, right? Literally. And Nick spoke about, and you never know what you're going to get from Nick. And when I asked the question, he gave me that look like, God damn it, Armen, there's always one question. It's like me and Ronaldo, we go down there and it's like Tom will call me and he goes, I got Nick, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, what's the angle? It's like it's age, or it's how long this, that, and I'm like, okay. And I said, well, I asked this question, and I said, Bear Bryant, he died 23 days after, and he retired, Nick. And I said, when you look at something like that, what do you see? And he said, and he gave me that look, and I didn't know whether he was going to give me a good answer or not. He goes, when I was about 5 years old, there was this thing in my closet. It was like a monster in my closet. And I was always afraid to open that door because there was a monster in there. And he goes, I kind of feel that way about retirement. I open that door, I don't know what's in that closet. And I know how I feel every single day when I wake up. And I can't see him walking away into the sunset, anytime soon. I mean, I think he could coach until he's 75 or 80. And, God bless Miss Terry, because she'd have to live another, 11 years of that. But that's the way these coaches are wired. It's like, oh, what am I going to do? This is who I am. And, that's a lot of that is, we see it in other walks of life too. They can't walk away. And whether it's a businessman or entertainer, comedian,
sure.
you lose your fastball,
sure.
but you still want to be out there on the mound. And so, but I was like, really, I talked to the PR person there, and I turned to him after it was over. I said, "Has he ever said something like that before?" He goes, "Oh no."
No.
And I was like, "Okay, well then I feel good."
That was the goods. That was the goods. I saw that one. He said like his greatest fear was not being a part of a team.
Yeah.
That was really deep. That was a piece.
And when you get him to go there, because you have to be prepared. You can't walk into an interview with Nick Saban and just wing it. And I always, that 60 Minutes mindset of when you sit down to do a 60 Minutes interview, I know more about you than you may know about you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be able to, like Ed Bradley was the best at it, and he described it as jazz. And so when you sit down, you don't do an interview, you have a conversation with somebody. But that conversation can go a million different ways right off the bat. You might think because your questions are 1 to 60 that it's going to go that way. Right. But they may answer your first question and then give you an answer to like your 15th question. And you can't go like scrambling, looking around, oh shit, now what? Oh, you go, oh yeah, that was right after, I think you broke your ankle or broke your leg or your mom died, whatever it is. And then now you're off and running because they know you've been prepared, you're prepared. You've treated them with respect that they deserve. And that's one of the nicest things I liked about you. You said to me before we sit down, I want to spend some time really looking at your career. And that's really what impressed me because, my career has been built on interviews and reporting. And I think that's what has elevated the quality of the journalism that I've produced over the years. And I have respect for people that do that. I don't have respect for people that say, oh, so where did you go to school?
Right. Right.
Tell me about yourself.
Right.
It's like I can get a monkey to do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I was trying to do my research. You have such an illustrious career. I was trying to get as much as I could. 60 Minutes, HBO Real Sports, some of the best shows out. What's the motivation when you do the investigative journalism? What's the goal? What are you after?
Well, it's trite to say it, but you're after as close to the version of truth as you can get to. And while and I know these words get tossed around to the point of almost they lose their definition, but you want to be fair. I've been, I love what I do. I've always loved what I do. I was a better than average baseball player in high school. I played college baseball at Central Michigan and at San Diego State. I started in those programs, not all the time, but enough to say that, I was a valuable part of the team. And, but it was either baseball, I love to read, reading opened the door to writing, and the curiosity that I had when I was reporting stories. And some of that was, I think my hero in terms of journalism was David Halberstam.
Okay.
Best and the Brightest, Breaks of the Game. I mean, he wrote some of the greatest books of all time. His reporting in Best of the Brightest, which changed my life on the Vietnam War and how America fell into that swamp, it just blew me away. And I remember I was a junior in high school reading it, and I thought, oh, I want to be able to do something like this someday. And so it was always journalism, and I came out of that Woodward and Bernstein school in 1976. I was a journalist in college. I wrote for the college paper, and I just I made a name for myself in San Diego when I was coming up through the ranks. I think I'm a better than average writer, but my stories were always filled with certain detail that other people didn't have. That was compounded at Sports Illustrated, where I went in 1982 to 1989, and I became the magazine's top investigative reporter for about 4 years. And that's where I really learned from other people, from my editor, Sandy Padwe. And, you go out and do some of those stories. It was way before, round-the-clock coverage of things. And so Sports Illustrated meant something when it showed up on your doorstep on Thursday. And Doug Looney and I, or Jack McCallum and I, would have gone out and done a investigative story on breaking news. Maybe it was a point shaving or a steroid thing or something. And we knew in our minds that, the deadline for the magazine was Monday afternoon. But that magazine was going to be printed and published, and it was going to be in people's mailboxes on Thursday. So our reporting had to hold for 3 more days. Yeah. And that sets a standard where you don't, Doug didn't eat. And I was like, Doug, I need to eat every once in a while. So that changed things for me. And then I just kind of fell in love with getting to the bottom of things. And whether, when you're at 60 Minutes, that's just the best of the best. You watch Scott Pelley, Steve Kroft, now Bill Whitaker. When I was there, Ed had just passed away. Anderson is really, really good. Sharon Alfonsi. It was a rock star group of people and producers who could really report. And then, so we kind of knew before we went out on the story, Jeff Fager, our executive producer, always said to us, just go into the story, report it. Don't go in thinking you know what the story is. Let the story come to you. And, if you learn about public record and how to find things, and I became pretty skilled at that because of some training I got from a guy in West Coast named Jack Tobin. It's amazing the things you can find in court records, whether it's a divorce or a bankruptcy or how many businesses or tax records, things like that, which when you're kind of in that high wire act I was on, you had to hang yourself on something. It couldn't be just oftentimes 2 people told me the same thing. If I showed up and I said, oh, well, but I also have this document where there was a deposition taken and this is exactly what he said. And so now we can say it, and we can say it with confidence. And, as I've gotten older, Jeff and I'm looking at, you have in front of you, William Tiger Woods. I mean, we poured 3 years of our life into that book.
Tiger Woods.
Yeah. So we're, that's about as far down the rabbit hole as I want to go.
I'm sure. And I had another journalist on, and I was thanking him. When I look at America and its freedoms, if there was one profession that I would point to that really highlights how free we are in America, it would be investigative journalism. In other countries, when guys are trying to uncover stuff, they disappear.
Yes.
So, but even here in America, it can be dangerous. It can get contentious. I was looking at an interview you did with Vince McMahon, the CEO of WWE.
Yeah.
You were talking with him about some of his wrestlers who had passed on.
Yeah.
He was upset. He actually slapped your notepad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I knew that was not going to go well from the beginning because Vince had already, they didn't like the line of questioning right from the start, sort of the thesis of the story that all these guys, I think under the age of 45, had died, many of them who at one time or another had worked for Vince McMahon. I'm going to be prepared in that. And Vince had already kind of gone toe-to-toe with Bob Costas.
Okay.
And I knew that, he could elevate out of that chair pretty quickly. But I also knew that I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of thinking that he could intimidate me, though we were at the WWE headquarters.
Wow.
So we're filming. I know they're filming. They've already threatened to sue HBO. They don't even know what the story is other than we're investigating these deaths under the age of 45. And it was a lifestyle issue. I mean, it was just between the drugs and the steroids and the late nights and the alcohol and the 200 nights a year that they would wrestle. It wasn't a surprise that these people were dying. But what I found to be rather astonishing was that Vince took absolutely no responsibility for anything. And then I kind of had a look on my face. I didn't know it, but I'm like, really? No responsibility? And a lot of times, William, it's not the first question. It's not the second question. It's not even the third question. A lot of times it's the question that they've never been asked, or you didn't have the either the stones to ask it, or you didn't have the backup to ask the question. And I did. I knew the facts. And so you want to argue facts with me? I'll argue facts all day long. If you want to get high and mighty with me, and you want a name call, I can be pretty tough too in an interview. But it's I've had a lot of adversarial interviews with people over the years, mainly because I was at the point. I was the guy that was at the tip of the spear going in for whether it was SI, or I was the chief investigative correspondent for CBS News for 7 years. And that's a different world. That's not sports, that's news, that's Washington, that's Madoff, that's, financial meltdown, crisis, all that stuff. And I've never been afraid to ask the question respectfully, as long as I felt like I had the right to ask it. Right. I'm not big on just throwing something out that's sensationalistic because I'm looking to get under your skin or look at me kind of thing. I've always believed that the most important person is the person across from me, but I'm not gonna show up and not know what I'm talking about. And I think sometimes I could actually see the light bulb go off when people are like, "Oh shit,
yeah,
this is not what I expected."
For sure. You've covered things from Russian doping in the Olympics to the Russian mob.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever been worried about your safety?
There was a period of time I won't go into too much detail, but I was investigating a point shaving scandal that involved a prominent athlete and the Detroit Mafia and the Justice Department, and then another group of people who were rivals to a certain crime family in Detroit, trying to take over territory and stuff. So it's funny because it was a period of time in my life where I thought I was a lot smarter than I was. And that's really dangerous. Oh, you don't understand. I've been doing this a long time. And I remember this one particular source said to me, "You have no idea what you're getting into." And I'm like, "Oh no, you don't understand. I've done this a lot." And this person said, no, you don't have any idea, and you're going to get killed. Wow. And there were times when my life was threatened, and in an odd way, the people that you would think I couldn't trust were the ones that turned out to be the ones I could trust, that watched my back. With this cast of characters I found myself in. But I went down a rabbit hole for about 18 months. And, it was a period of time where it was I was in over my head. And the fact that I got out and we were able to print some things that were, we never got sued over because we were right. But getting to that right, it took a lot out of me, and I wouldn't recommend doing that again.
Do you turn to the law enforcement? Do you turn to the publication to say, "Yo, this is what I'm faced with"? Or
no, because it was a part of a book, so I was kind of on my own.
Wow.
And I was doing it with two other people. It was Money Players, I can say that. Okay. It was an NBA related thing. Okay. And somebody read the book. I'm probably not. They're not surprised with what I'm talking about, but it was. I was in because I had had the Justice Department that was trying to figure out what I was doing, and they were pulling every string they had in order to get the information that they wanted, and they did some things that I was like, oh, huh, I thought the mafia did that,
Right.
and then the people that I had given my word to about protecting a certain aspect of my investigation, they stepped in at a certain point in time and warned some other people off, and then just said, you mess with him, you're going to mess with us. And that was a warning, like from the highest level of a certain segment of Detroit society.
Wow.
And so I've gotten a lot smarter about things over the years in terms of, I think some of the work that's been done, in Afghanistan and real, battle zones and where people are in fear of their life every single day, every minute of every day. I've never been in that situation. And I give, the Lara Logans of the world, when she was at CBS News and in Afghanistan and Iraq and, Iran and doing things that very, very, Clarissa Ward at CNN, she's an astonishing reporter, fearless. And that's just, that takes a certain mindset that I wouldn't do well in that. I know where my lane is.
And you do a great job. And that's one thing that was interesting about this book, The System. You have this access, but at times you're telling stories that are not very flattering for the people involved in the sport. What type of feedback did you receive from those individuals once this book is released? Does it even matter? Or what?
Oh, I think it matters. Did anybody say something was wrong? No. That's kind of like my bottom line. Well, is it wrong?
Right.
No, it's not wrong. Well, why? I'm like, you saw me there. Yeah. It's like, you don't think I'm observant? You don't think I'm going to, kind of my history. And I'm, but I don't think in the end, we pointed some direct fingers at people within the system, almost in every chapter. But I can't tell you what Jeff and I went through in the vetting process with the lawyers. And I still have in my attic, I have file folders from like 1982 or 3 that a story might come around and maybe it's a sexual assault story. And I was doing sexual assault stories, in the 80s on campus. And there may be something in there that I'm like, oh, so Arkansas, this basketball back in the 80s. And so I just, I just, the truth is, to me, is I always operate under the mindset, can I defend this in court? That's my number one rule. So am I going to guess at it? No. Am I going to put something out there that I think is right? No, because I'm too far up. I'm walking on a wire tightrope that's probably whatever. It's high. It's pretty high up. It's a long fall, and you only have to do that once, and your career is over. People don't trust you anymore because you screwed them, or you said. Another thing I say to people, and you can make a name for yourself by saying A and doing B a couple times. I'm not quoting you directly. Well, you're quoting them directly. Or it's off the record, which to me is like, I don't use off the record a lot because I can't use any of that information off the record. But on background, and I'll work with people like, okay, can we say this, that you were a radio show host in the Midwest, during this period of time? Yes. But that all is, that's all decided up front. And then, that I just kind of live in fear of, if push comes to shove and we get sued, can I defend this? And my answer is yes. And it's been yes. And if I can't, then we're not putting it in the book, or we're not putting it on television. And, when you're, a lot of times when you're the chief investigative correspondent, I'm making those decisions before the people that are my bosses ever see the script.
Right.
Because I'm not going to put something in there like, well, how do we know this? Well, so-and-so told me. And there were times when I would get a phone call from downstairs, we call the fishbowl, the bowl, something was breaking, and they're like, well, the so-and-so is reporting that such and such has happened. And I'm like, well, who's so-and-so? And they're like, well, it's this website out of LA. And I'm like, okay, I'll make a couple calls, but I don't know this person from Adam.
Right.
Now, if it's somebody I know from SI, or if it's somebody I know over the years that I can trust their reporting, if Jeff Benedict's reporting, and I know what Jeff Benedict's been through to get to that, but I don't know this person.
Right.
And I would have these arguments. I'm like, I'm not putting that. Well, we need to get confirmation. I said, I don't even know if this is true. Yeah. And so the speed now, to me, is what's really dangerous in terms of the velocity of news and, single source confirmation. So-and-so told me, I don't know if it's true. Right. There's the disclaimer. I don't know if it's true, but I was told that such and such. And that's ridiculous. Now he's got an opinion on something he doesn't even know if it's true, he or him. Right. Or her.
So single source, and we see so many people talk about sources today. What is, I guess, the standard? So, Adam Schefter, all these Shams and Woj.
Yeah.
If a general manager and a player are in a room and they both walk out and tell Woj a story, like, how do you know which one's true? How do you know you're not being used? Like, how do you guys confirm this information?
Yeah, I'm not an insider, so I don't live that day to day. I don't relish. I mean, they're great at it,
right.
But I think the speed, the velocity can get you in trouble because you may hear something from somebody who has an agenda because an agent or a GM is pushing a certain narrative, and you just become the megaphone for that particular piece of information without checking it out. Or you come to rely on a front office source as a single source. I think that's dangerous. I understand sometimes why people will go with that information because that particular person has you've developed a trust with them. They haven't screwed you over time. But there's a few people that if they said something to me, I would say, okay, they know they're not going to do that to me. But when you're, when the shit's hitting the fan and you're on deadline at a network and it's the CBS Evening News and somebody's telling you something and it's 4:00 and you've got to have a script in no later than 5 and you're just, okay, now I got to go and make some phone calls. And if I don't have it, I'm not going to go down to the bowl and say, well, we got it. I'm going to say I'm going to try to get it, but if I don't have it by 6 or 6:15, we're not run. I can write a script, but if it's not going on the air, I'm not going to put it on the air. And I think now it's just
you've accomplished too much. It's not even worth it.
It's not. All I can do is screw my life
right,
up at this
right,
point in time.
Yeah.
I mean,
You've
it's
done too
like,
much.
well, it's people have asked me to do things, and I'm like, I don't want to do that because I don't trust the news organization or whatever it is. And I think what's happened now in our world is there's so much opinion. It's hard for the person that's consuming that information to determine the veracity of it. I mean, there's some. I mean, I spent some time with Jim Rome, and Jim has an old school quality to him. It's like he's not going to say something unless he's made some calls. I think Colin Cowherd's the same way. He's got sources and he uses them. He reports before he says something. I don't know if it's all the time, but those are the kinds of things that I respect when I hear it. Other people that I can watch, and not for very long, because I'm like, how in the world do you know that?
Right.
So it's I just think it's become very dangerous in terms of where fact and opinion kind of start to blur.
Yes.
And I'm just at the point now where, as you said, all I can do is screw it up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I kind of work, and it can. And think about it, William. It can disappear in a day.
Yeah.
35 years of my career can go up in flames on a tweet, on a photo, on stupidity, on agendas, whatever it is. And I've really dialed back, working quietly.
Yeah.
Except as this guy.
Tiger Woods. What's this, 2018 bestseller?
Yeah, #1 New York Times bestseller. It was HBO doc.
In 2021. Now, this is a biography. Did you ever get to speak to Tiger firsthand?
Not one
So this
word.
is, you spoke about that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You put your credibility, your career, your name on the line.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods' team wasn't too fond of it.
Yeah.
But like you said, you stand by it.
All bark, no bite, in terms of the reaction. And, Jeff and I, quick story, the system, when you sell a book to a publisher, you go through a process, you put a proposal together, there's an auction, people decide whether they want to do it or not. The proposal for the system was 60 pages long because we had to kind of explain in the big picture to the publishers what we were trying to accomplish. The Tiger Woods proposal was 4 pages long. And what Jeff and I determined fairly early on, when our agent called us and he said, so what boys, what do you want to do next after the system? And I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I'm kind of busy over here at CBS News. And he goes, well, what about Tiger Woods? And I'm like, hasn't there been a million books written about Tiger Woods? And Jeff and I started, it was a weekend, it was a Saturday at my house. And we just went on the internet and we looked and we're like, this is interesting. There have been a lot of books, but they all deal with certain very specific times of his life.
Yeah.
Right before right after he turned pro, during the early 2000s when he went on that huge run, and then 2010 after the crash on Thanksgiving in 2009. So there had been, and then Earl had written 3 books, and there were some very accomplished authors who had done terrific work, but they were all within segments of Tiger's life. No one had ever written this expansive 360-degree view of Tiger's life, answering 2 questions: who is Tiger Woods and what's the price of genius? That was our driving force. Yeah. And so what we said to Simon & Schuster, our editor at Simon & Schuster, was we needed 3 years to do it. And 3 years is a long time. I felt like I was in the Robert Caro territory with Lyndon Johnson, where he's got to go down to the Texas Hill Country and live with the Hill people. So he understands what it was like for LBJ to be down there. I'm like, okay. But what happened was we spent the first year doing really nothing, but reading everything that had been written of significance about Tiger. So we knew what was out there. I went through, I think, 350 press conferences where he talked about, not just golf, but he would mention his father, or he'd mention, injuries, or he'd mention training with the SEALs. Occasionally something would slip out. Those got all color-coded by subject. So I could go in and look for something. I could look at all the yellows and know in the press conferences, that's about Stevie Williams or something like that. And then the next year was really basically doing the reporting, finding people, because of all the reading that we had done. There were a lot of people that were the usual suspects, certainly in terms of people that we had to interview, but there were also a lot of people that had never been interviewed, whose lives had intersected with Tiger's at various times during his life, and they had stories to tell. And so, but they weren't just sitting on the front porch waiting for us to show up.
Right.
We had to gain their trust, and that was a long process. And then the final year was really just full-on writing. But I'm really proud. I'm proud of both of those books. I think the, Raw Recruits, which was with Alex Wolf, broke new ground for college basketball recruiting. The system did it in college football. I think Tiger did it in golf.
Tiger.
You know, he's a fascinating case study.
Big time. Big time. Armen, a few things I wanted to know about Tiger. Tiger won his Masters in '97. I was 12 years old. I wasn't really paying attention to him. In the documentary that HBO aired, there's footage of him as a young man speaking about being a black man, understanding the challenges associated with being a black man in golf.
Yeah.
Fast forward to when he turns pro, he joins Nike, and they're having a discussion, and marketing execs are we going to use racial discord to market him?
I don't know if it's discord. We're going to use race as a theme.
Okay.
To define Hello World with Tiger.
And one of the marketing execs said, like, fuck yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, and his first commercial says, I'm still not allowed on some golf courses.
Yeah.
Like, speaking to being a black man in the sport. But then fast forward when he goes to Oprah, it turns into him being a Cablinasian.
Yeah, Calibinasian.
So it's like he was stepping away from identifying as a black man. Why did that happen? Who signed off on that?
I don't think he ever really identified as black. I think Earl identified him as black because he had a drop of black blood in him. And son, in America, you're black. And, you know, it's interesting you bring that up because we did a podcast with Brian Koppelman, who is the creator of Billions. Very high-end, you know, Hollywood screenwriter and executive producer. And one of the questions he asked us was, both Jeff and I, well, you're two white guys. You know, how can you possibly write about the black experience for a professional golfer? And I said, well, when you spend 3 years in someone's life interviewing 250 people, you get a pretty good understanding of what he went through in certain parts of his life, whether it was something he said to somebody or whether something that another person observed. And that's to understand Tiger, you have to understand Earl. And Earl's background, his dad, I mean, no question there was racism in Earl's, when he was at, Kansas State and as a catcher and had to stay in a all black hotel and in the military. I mean, Earl felt the sting of racism through his entire life, and he wanted his son to know that, whether it's Asian or a little drop of white or black, you're black. And Tiger never embraced that.
Right. That's what I experienced most of my adult life. So when I saw that footage of him as a young man speaking to, hey, being a black man and not being able to be allowed on some golf course, having to be kicked off and called names. And then when I saw that very first Nike commercial in the documentary, because I didn't remember it, I was shocked. And, I liken it to OJ. In that documentary, he said, I'm not black, I'm OJ.
Yeah.
Like, the more popular they get, they kind of become, I guess, step away from being black or racially ambiguous. And I just want to know, like, why did that take place?
Well, because corporate America was selling Tiger as, they weren't selling him as, the black Jesus.
Right.
They were selling him as the greatest golfer of, individual golfer maybe of all time next to Jack, certainly the greatest of his generation by far. And, Nike, Accenture, Buick, all these things, Tiger was an image and an image of a winner. I think to his credit, unquestionably, he understands the history of black golf. He understands Lee Elder. He understands Charlie Sifford. He understands the barriers that were broken in order for him to walk on, at Augusta. And he's respectful of that in extraordinary ways. But did he relate to his sport as a black athlete? I think he related to his sport as somebody that I'm going to dominate the profession of golf until I decide I don't want to do it anymore. And, he dated Dina Gravel, his first true love in high school in Anaheim growing up. She was white, beautiful. Earl broke that up. Tita, his mom, broke that up. Not because she was white, but because she was an impediment to the plan, to the grand plan that Earl and Tita had for Tiger. Dina was in Las Vegas at that point in time. Tiger wanted to go to UNLV and play for Dwayne Knight, who had a tremendous golf program there. But, Stanford was where Tiger was going to go. And the breakup is, in the book, and you see it in the doc. It's because Dina finally decided that she was going to sit and tell her story. I mean, it's gut wrenching.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think now with Black Lives Matter and an understanding, a deeper understanding, and I look at the NFL and I don't, I just think it's just more PR for the league. But when you look at some of the other things that have been done, extraordinary things have been done by NFL players and Major League Baseball players and basketball players, NBA. I think we're in a better place, and I don't know whether Tiger now. I don't even know whether he relates to his heritage more as a black athlete. I think he just relates to himself as Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods. Another thing I didn't understand about Tiger's story, why? Okay, he gets in trouble. The world knows that he has all these dalliances with women other than his wife. Why did his golf game suffer? Like, you've seen people go through turmoil and if in their personal life, and it focused them on the field of play. Why did it seem like he forgot how to play golf?
Well, if you go back to that, I mean, that was, probably the biggest fall from grace in the history of, professional athletes. I mean, I don't know any, OJ maybe, but Tiger's was you're falling off of Mount Everest. And
because of adultery? Like, that's what I didn't understand.
Well, no, because of the media, the way the media played it. Don't forget when OJ happened, there was no TMZ, there was no Twitter, there was no, even CNN. I mean, it was 24 hours. To me, the doc that showed the reaction, the avalanche of people that jumped on the bandwagon to make fun of Tiger's situation, whether it was at The View or Howard Stern or, Late Night, Jay Leno or people like that. It becomes fodder for them. It's just oxygen for them. But for the person that's experiencing it, you can't leave your house. You can't go out in public. You are a pariah at that point in time. And so part of that is the emotional and the mental side of it. Okay. The other side of it is, he was breaking down physically too, because of, the man was a workout fiend, and he changed the game of golf obviously physically, with how he looked, but also his commitment to weight training and things of that nature. Your body only can take so much, and one of the people I talked to was like, he had problems with his foot, but then there's that old kid's song that, the ankle bone's connected to the knee bone bone's connected to the thigh bone's connected to the hip bone, to the backbone, to the neck bone. Mm-hmm. And it was just this cascading series of injuries. And, you can't play golf injured. Mm-hmm. And Tiger wouldn't rest enough because he just felt like he could, I could overcome it. Mm-hmm. What he did in the 2008 U.S. Open at Torrey Pines is like, it's biblical,
Playing
so
injured.
Yeah.
With
a broken leg, basically. So I think his, to me, what he has accomplished, and we'll see now, as we sit here tomorrow, is the beginning of the PNC as far as the Pro-Am. It's the weekend, the father-son tournament. He's going to be back playing, certainly out of a cart. I don't know. It'll be. I don't know where the ending is. There's interest in a scripted series now on Tiger, and we have about 7 episodes that we've plotted out. I don't know what episode 8 is. I don't know what the final act is, and some of that we'll see a little bit of that today. But Tiger's, trust me, Tiger's whatever he's giving you now is a well thought out plan that has an end game to it. Whether he plays professionally or not again, I don't know. I can't see it, honestly, because I can't see him walking a championship tournament course for 4 days. And that's where can he hit on the range and walk out of a cart and hit a shot? He's doing it, no question. But a world-class setup at a major, oof.
Not likely. I want to circle back to college football. I got one more for you there. And then, have you seen any of Deion Sanders' I guess, reality show with Barstool?
I have not.
Okay, he's going around the town, not just as he's revitalized the team and the school, but the whole city is counting on him. And we talk inspirational leader. So when I heard that he was interviewing with TCU, I was kind of disappointed. Like, Jackson, Mississippi needs you. You know what I'm saying? Where are you going? And then yesterday it came out that he flipped the number one football recruit in the country who was going to Florida State University, big time college football, actually Deion's alma mater, and he's getting that young man to go to HBCU, go to Jackson State. How do you think Deion's career is going to play out? Like,
well, he's shaking up. I mean, that was a world class. That was a neutron bomb that went off yesterday in college football with that big switch. Well, look, Deion has got no shortage of charisma and an ability to figure things out far faster than the average bear. So I think it's extraordinary that the number one recruit in the country, right, cornerback, straight out of the Deion mold, is going to go to Jackson State because it's going to. I mean, it was like an earthquake. 7.0 earthquake that shook the ground that college football rests on. So is that gonna happen more often than not? I don't know. I don't think there's no other coach that I think carries that kind of weight. Eddie George is now at Tennessee State. That's Nashville. Eddie's one of my favorite people in the history of covering the NFL is Eddie George. That's a man, and I think that, Deion's got all of that swagger and that promotion and the whole believe thing that's now going on. I think it's great for college football. Where we go from here. I mean, there's all sorts of now. I've been reading some of the questions being raised. Okay, what's the deal with Barstool and Deion and this young recruit? That's where things get murky. And I know a lot of the NCAA. Well, not a lot of them, but I know the NCAA investigative staff pretty well and what their mindset is. I don't envy them. Try to pick your way through this landmine. But you know what? It's great for college football. I mean, look, the money's going to come in there now. And TCU, let's just throw that out there. Really, TCU? Right. I mean, with all due respect to all the TCU graduates, I mean, is that really where Deion is, a step up to compete in that conference and, fight over all those recruits out of Texas? Why not take where you are right now and just build? Right.
That's what I would hope to see, man. So when I heard he was interviewing for TCU, I'm like, Texas Christian doesn't need you. Jackson does. Armen, illustrious career. I when I went to reach out to you, I looked at your Twitter account, and I believe it says Truth Seeker.
Yeah.
I said, oh, this is my kind of guy. And you've spent a career doing so, covering different sports. And not to mention you stepped away from sports, the Russian mob. Could you categorize, or I guess, who are these people that don't want the truth to come out, that are hiding the truth, that are suppressing the truth? Like, is there one commonality amongst all of them? Like, how would you describe them?
Well, I think the commonality is
and what are they up to? Sorry.
Well, I mean, that's a big question, William. I think right now, if I had to look at Washington and the partisanship and the insurrection, January 6th, the mob violence and the attack on democracy and in the Capitol, statesmanship has been replaced by self-interest. And how does this, how can I fundraise off of this statement or this outrage that I'm going to express, even though I don't believe it? I'm playing to a certain, I mean, if Donald Trump has said once, I can't lose my base. He said it 1,000 times. I can't lose my base. I have to play to my base. Well, that's an interesting word because the base, there's a certain base philosophy that goes along with that, an anger about, your situation in life, a distrust of the government, a partisanship that I haven't seen in my lifetime in terms of politics. And so I think that everybody's agenda now, there's so many agendas, and there's so many people that in the good old days the senior voices on the Hill, the senators, the statesmen, would have had far more influence over a certain segment of Congress now. That's not to say what some of the younger representatives are pushing isn't right, but it's just every day. It's hand-to-hand combat there, and it's exhausting. And trying to figure out what everybody's agenda is and what the long game is for these people is frankly more intellectual firepower than I want to devote at this point in time. I suffer with it every day. You know, I mean, we can talk about we're sitting in the middle of another wave of COVID right now, whether it's Omicron or whether it's Delta, or it's like where we are in Connecticut right now. It's just ravaging its way through these communities. And, you know, I was in a cab in New York yesterday, and a guy he immigrated to America, and he's just railing about politicians and, you know, they're putting stuff in our bodies and this is just crazy and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you know, and I didn't want to just like, I couldn't help myself. I said, well, you know, 800,000 people have died, you know, because of the virus. Right. And 80% of them are over 65 years old, which I have a certain vested interest in. And, but that didn't stop them, you know. You know, it's the flu. The flu's the same way. So when you get into those situations, I actually went in for a physical yesterday, and my doctor, who's a great doctor, he goes, look, it falls into three categories. The most important one is the first one is you're not going to change people's minds at this point in time. So you have to realize that. That's the one. So believe what you want to believe. You're not going to change a certain segment of people's minds. But there are certain things that you can do if you do believe in vaccinations. You know, in terms of booster shots and like where you go now. I mean, you have to be careful again. So I'm sorry I segued over there, but it's just been driving me nuts the last day.
All right. Armen Keteyian, greatly appreciate this.
You're welcome.
This is, again, life-changing stuff for me. What's next for Armen Keteyian?
Well, I'm working on a book. I can't talk about it, but I'm collaborating with in a certain segment of the sports world, a very famous person who's got a wildly entertaining personal story that cuts across a lot of different lines. And so for the last 15 months, I've just been working with him. I have a project with Time Studios, which is the movie arm of Time Magazine. We're in development of a 4-part docuseries with Netflix on a certain black athlete in the NFL that broke barriers, and so that's been really interesting. And that's really it. I'm doing 2 things, and that's keeping me busy enough to not get in too much trouble.
Sounds good.
William, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's Armen Keteyian. I'm William Holly. Out.